have Lawrence in St. Paul, Minnesota. Hey, Lawrence, what's on your mind?
Well, you started talking about these last two callers, the one talking about the board. He was exactly right if you ever watched that show, and your previous caller talking about what's wrong with the Democratic Party. Hey, if you guys are still listening, listen. Here's what's wrong with the Democratic Party in a nutshell. They never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. They had it and they blew it. And I'm going to tell you why. And, Thom, I understand your appreciation for Keith Ellison, but that is not the guy we need to head the Democratic Party. We need somebody like a Van Jones. We need, and these Democratic...
I would not be at all opposed to Van Jones heading up the DNC. I just, to the best of my knowledge, he has no interest in the job.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. And Keith Ellison, he's complicit. You know, I'm from Minnesota. I follow Keith Ellison, and most of the time he's always got the same argument, the we need to work together argument. That's not the way the Democrats are going to win, because the Democrats are actually complicit in their zeal to work with the Republicans. The Republicans have done nothing, and they have nothing other than obstruct the government. Now, if you work with that, you are being complicit. So you're agreeing with working to disrupt the government because that's all the Republicans want to do. And here's the bottom line for how the Democrats are going to win. For your audience, I don't know if they're familiar with what's going on in BritX and what's going on with the France election and what's going on with Donald Trump. All of these three people have something in common. They don't want to mix the races. Now, I know when I say race, everybody just goes crazy. Please do not go crazy. Here's the point. Since Donald Trump's election, nobody on the news media has talked about anything except it's the economy. It's the white voters were left out. No, nobody has talked about what the real issue is, and that is it was a white backlash, exactly like Van Jones, which is the only person that says something about it.
Yeah, he called it a white lash.
Yeah, a white lash. That's what it was. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with this that just happened. This doctor has been suspended. What she said was Michelle Obama looks like a monkey. Now, A couple of weeks before that, a realtor was saying Michelle Obama looks like a monkey in high heels. A couple of weeks before that, a couple of days ago, you had a Delta passenger gets on an airplane and he's yelling Donald Trump and yelling, yeah, he won. He's going to bring my white power back. That's what. Yeah,
I saw the video.
Says. Yep, and then before that, you had all kind of swastikas on school property and other stuff. Now, what these things have in common is this. They're not talking about the economy. They're not talking about building a wall. They're just talking about preserving white privilege.
And white supremacy.
Yes, and this is where the Democrats can win. Over in Europe, they're talking about the same thing, preserving white privilege and supremacy.
Right.
We as Americans can say, hey, look, we have the same problem over here, but what makes America different is that we're not afraid of anybody of color. So white people, they're going to have to stand up and they're going to have to not fear a browning of America, and the Democrats are going to have to go out to that. They can't go out talking about, and I respect Bernie Sanders and I respect your zeal for him too, but they can't go out talking about, you need to get corporate America to pay their share. No, forget about that. Get the middle America guy. If you look at the electoral map, you can see what happened. Get middle America who says, I'm afraid of losing my white privilege. Democrats, get on that and say, hey, look, don't be afraid of your white privilege. This is how we're going to protect it. And that's how the Democrats win.
Yeah, well, the way that you protect white people who are worried about losing white privilege, the largest piece of white privilege that they're worried about losing is economic, which takes us back to basically, Bernie's arguments.
Oh, I agree. So if that is what you're afraid of, Democrats approach it from that angle, say that, look, we know what you're afraid of. Your white privilege, you have nothing to be worried about, but your enemy is not the black guy.
Yeah.
Your enemy
No, I get that. You know, there's also a difference, Lawrence. I mean, you know, if you want to get into a more nuanced conversation about this, there is a very consequential difference between Europe and the United States. And that is that and having lived in Germany for a year, I didn't understand this until I lived there. I learned the language. I lived in a little town in the middle of nowhere. You know, I was immersed up to my eyeballs. And my mentor, the fellow who ran this international program, International Relief Organization out of Germany, had been in Hitler's army, right? So it's like, you know, I really saw this thing through a whole bunch of different eyes. And what in Europe, if you are traditionally, historically, if you're a German because you can track ancestors back to the Huns. I mean, you can track ancestors back 1,000 years who share your and not just that. I mean, there's different parts of Germany. If you're Schwabish, you have a particular look. If you're North German, you have a particular look. I mean, there's even, you know, you can pretty much spot where people are from in the country by how they look. If you're French, it's because your ancestors were French. If you're Swedish, it's because your ancestors were Swedish. If you and there are these, you know, and so the browning of Europe, which in Germany came about in large part because after World War II they didn't have enough men left over, living men after World War II, to literally rebuild the country. So they brought in all these Turks. They called them guest workers, Gastarbeiters. And now some of them are fourth generation, and many of them still don't have German citizenship. That's a problem. And now you've got all these refugees, mostly Arabs, mostly of, you know, people that would be considered people of color by Europeans. And that's got the Europeans freaked out. In the United States, though, even though this country was arguably founded by white supremacists, by white power, by white privilege, and that was, you know, we fought a civil war over it and we maintained it for years and years. At least our founding documents and our ideology, our notion of who we are, is that we are inclusive, that we are a melting pot. So even though that story hasn't played out in reality, it's still part of our cultural and political DNA. And that's something I think we can, you know, we can work with here, and much more effectively, frankly, than European politicians. That's where Marine Le Pen has an advantage over Donald Trump, for example. Am I making sense?
And to that point, that's an excellent point. Here's the point, and this is what your previous caller was trying to say. I fly all over the country. Everywhere you go in the little small towns, there's only one or two choices: Fox News or right-wing radio.
Right-wing hate radio, and that is institutional. I mean, that is an ownership issue, and that's something that the right has been working on for 30 years to build that infrastructure, and it's a very, very powerful infrastructure. And you know, we need to be challenging that, and this is another area where the Democratic Party thought, yeah, we don't need to worry about that. Lawrence, thanks for the call.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann program.